I'm Ashley Hanson, a senior from Elk, Washington, where I grew up on this 4-generation dairy farm, and I'm currently standing in front of our 4,000-gallon bulk tank. We are constantly trying to improve our production process to keep up with new science and technology. Recently, a rise in public concern over antibiotic use and some restrictive legislation in the European Union led me to this question. What are the alternatives to blanket dry treating dairy cows with antimicrobials for intramammary infections, such as mastitis? In this presentation, we will cover the reason for this decrease in antimicrobial use, the suggested treatment methods for U.S. dairymen, the efficacy of selective dry cow therapy as opposed to blanket dry cow therapy, and then we will discuss the economic optimization of selective therapy. We will wrap up with organic therapy alternatives, as well as a gel infusion alternative option for farmers. The catalyst to this discussion in the dairy industry was the 2012 Netherlands ban on antimicrobials. According to this study, antimicrobial use was to be reduced by 20% in 2011 and 70% by 2015. This occurred due to the public's rising concern with antibiotic contamination in their food supply, as well as an increase in antimicrobial resistance in Dutch livestock. This 2012 ban caused Dutch farmers to switch from blanket to selective dry cow therapy. Known as the Dairyman's Bible, Hoard's dairymen define selective dry cow treatment as the process of selecting and treating only those cows that show signs of infection, eliminating the need to treat every cow in the herd. Andy Johnson, also known as the Udder Doctor, said, "The most difficult piece of the puzzle for selective dry cow treatment is picking the right cows to treat and the correct ones to skip. This requires accurate and extensive record keeping. Following Johnson's 3-pronged decision model, a cow that qualifies as not in need of treatment would have no case of mastitis during its last lactation, no history of a somatic cell count greater than 150,000 cells per milliliter, and have healthy T-ends with a score of less than 2 during T-end evaluation." In a 2018 Dairy Herd Management article, the Council for Dairy Cattle Breeding stated that from 1995 to 2015, somatic cell count dropped 100 points from 304,000 to 204,000. Especially in the last 10 years, there has been a significantly fewer clinical mastitis cases and better overall herd health in U.S. dairies. Pamela Rugg of the University of Wisconsin recommends adding a quarter screening test like the California mastitis test and an internal teat sealant for cows who are not dry treated before their dry period. Here's a flowchart from that Dairy Herd Management article provided by the University of Wisconsin Milk Quality Team. It deals with the decision-making process for selective dry cow therapy from the herd level down to individual cow level, asking questions based on quarters and leading to the appropriate treatment methods. In a 2018 Dutch study, the effects of selective dry cow therapy on udder health were measured. Authors stated that the goal of dry cow therapy is to treat any existing intramammary infections at dry off and to prevent the occurrence of new intramammary infections during the dry period. This study evaluates the somatic cell count dynamics during the dry period following the Netherlands transition from blanket dry cow therapy to selective dry cow therapy. To qualify as infected and in need of treatment, somatic cell count in the first-time calving cows had to be greater than 150,000 and 250,000 in multiple birth cows. Here's a simple flowchart from the study describing this decision-making process for dairymen who decide to use the selective dry cow therapy method. This next study also looked at the effects the ban had on sales for intramammary dry cow treatment. According to the authors, from 2011 to 2013, the average new intramammary infections remained at 16% of dry cows. In 2014, it jumped to 18%, and in 2015, decreased to 17%. Overall, there was a significant decrease in antimicrobial use and little to no change in udder health when using selective dry cow therapy. The authors offer the possibility that the shift from blanket to selective dry cow therapy caused dairymen and their veterinarians to adjust their focus to other management practices such as hygiene and transitioning the cows across the farm. The authors also suggest that an intramammary teat sealant at dry off could increase the odds of a low somatic cell count, especially in herds of large sizes. The next study looked at the economic side of selective dry cow therapy versus blanket dry cow therapy, aiming to develop a mathematical model that identifies the ideal cost scenario of selective dry cow treatment. They also cautioned dairymen to consider udder health, welfare, production losses, antimicrobial use, and economic consequences when determining a dry cow therapy plan. They define total cost of mastitis as a sum of both preventative costs and failure costs. Scherpenziel et al. Determined the most feasible selection method is based on monthly somatic cell count. Initially, Scherpenziel et al. Determined that selective dry cow therapy seemed to be the optimal approach from an economic standpoint. However, they eventually concluded that a small change in the probabilities of the rate of infection and costs associated with mastitis move the economically optimal decision towards blanket dry cow therapy. Once again, these authors suggested the use of teat sealants as a preventative tool. From a risk avoidance approach, Sherpinzeel et al. Recommends the blanket dry cow therapy method. Overall, the authors concluded that the economics should not be used as a main argument in support of selective dry cow therapy because it can lead to economically damaging consequences, such as an increased bulk tank somatic cell count and clinical mastitis incidences. According to the authors of this next study, total sales of organic fluid milk doubled between 2006 and 2011, representing 4% of the total fluid milk market in the U.S. today. Interestingly enough, organic farmers must not withhold treatment to preserve the organic status of a cow. This leads to the cow either not being treated at all or being removed from the herd completely. These regulations have led organic dairies to seek alternative dry treatment methods that their local certifying agency approves. The biggest problem here is that no alternatives to antibiotics are currently approved by the FDA to treat intramammary infections. The study also stated that a single case of mastitis can cost more than $100 per cow per farmer. The study looked at the efficacy of two herbal dry cow treatment alternatives, Phytomast and Cinetube, in comparison to conventional dry cow therapy and no treatment at all. Phytomast ingredient list includes herbs such as bai ji and Chinese licorice, as well as thyme. Cinetube, as its name suggests, includes cinnamon, marigold, eucalyptus, and tea tree oil, as well as beeswax. On this label, found on New Agritech's website, you can see the product label for Cinetube. You can also note that it is for use as an internal teat sealant only and not for deep intramammary infusion. The study found that there was no significant differences between treatment types occurred in the number of cured infection quarters. Cinetube treated quarters were less likely to experience a new infection than non-treated quarters. Again, the big problem here is that neither herbal product has been approved by the FDA, and the lines there get a little blurry depending on how the milk is marketed. The authors also warn that the mammary gland is extremely susceptible to irritation and all infusions need to be non-irritating. As you can imagine, ingredients such as cinnamon and other essential oils could prove to be irritating. Overall, the products did not adversely affect milk production. According to this next study, India is the largest milk-producing country in the world. However, per capita availability of milk still remains half the world average due to poor animal health, specifically with concern to mastitis. This study looks at a dry cow gel infusion in water buffalo. The authors found that an herbal topical formulation called Mastilep may help reduce somatic cell count in comparison to Indians' conventional dry cow treatment, which was no treatment at all. In conclusion, these studies really just come down to dairymen's national and state regulations followed by co-op regulations and then a dairyman's priorities in herd and udder health. According to Patel et al., the efficacy of bovine mastitis treatment depends on the cause, clinical manifestation, antibiotic susceptibility of etiological agent, and the efficiency of immune system for the animal. And according to Van Hoot et al., overall, when managed appropriately at the cow and herd levels, animals with a low risk of developing an intramammary infection during the dry period can be successfully dried out without the use of intramammary antimicrobials. Finally, however, Sherpinzeel et al. Concluded that a small change in the probability of the rate of infection and costs associated with mastitis move the economically optimal decisions toward blanket dry cow treatment. It would be the most ideal treatment method for dairymen who prioritize udder health above anything else. Please leave any questions that you have in the comment section on the discussion board. Thank you for watching, and go Pokes!